The gunshot echoing through the valley sent flocks of startled birds into the sky as Nora Whitman stood her ground, smoke still rising from the barrel of her Winchester. The year was 1885, and in the small frontier town of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, a woman defending her property with a rifle was enough to set tongues wagging for weeks, especially when that woman was a widow of just 6 months. "You've been warned, Hargrove. The next shot won't miss." Nora's voice carried across the dusty yard, her dark hair escaping the loose bun at the nape of her neck. Edgar Hargrove and his men retreated, mounting their horses with scowls etched deep into their weather-beaten faces. "This ain't over, Mrs. Whitman. No woman can hold onto land this valuable alone." As the dust from their horses' hooves settled, Nora lowered her rifle and exhaled slowly. The 300 acres she now stood on had been her husband's prime grazing land with a year-round creek cutting through the western edge. James had worked himself to death for this ranch, and less than a day after they'd laid him in the ground, the vultures had started circling. 6 months of threats, sabotage, and increasingly bold attempts to drive her off had only hardened her resolve. At 27, Nora wasn't ready to surrender the life she and James had built together. But standing alone against men like Hargrove was becoming increasingly dangerous. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her raise her rifle again, but she lowered it upon seeing the familiar figure of Leland Cooper, owner of the general store in town. "Mrs. Whitman," he called out, pulling his horse to a stop. "Thought I heard gunfire. Everything all right?" "Just reminding Mr. Hargrove where my property line is," Nora replied, her grip on the rifle relaxing slightly. Leland dismounted, concern etched on his kindly face. "Nora, these men are dangerous. The whole town's talking. They're saying a widow like yourself is too bold for her own good." "And what would they have me do? Surrender everything James and I worked for?" "No, but—" Leland hesitated. "Perhaps consider selling. I know of several respectable buyers who would give you a fair price, enough to set yourself up comfortably in town or even back east with your sister." Nora's jaw set firmly. "This is my home, Leland. I'm not going anywhere." The storekeeper sighed, handing her the mail and supplies she'd ordered. "At least think about it. A woman alone out here, it isn't natural." After Leland departed, Nora went about her evening chores with practiced efficiency, feeding the horses, checking on the small herd of cattle, and repairing a loose board on the barn door. Only when she finally stepped inside her modest cabin did she allow her shoulders to slump with exhaustion. The cabin walls seemed to close in on her as she prepared a simple supper. 6 months was a long time to carry on conversations with only herself and her animals. Sometimes she caught herself speaking aloud to James, as if he might answer from his chair by the fireplace. She unfolded Leland's newspaper as she ate. The headline caught her attention immediately: "Railroad coming to Copper Creek, land values expected to soar." Her heart sank. So that explained Hargrove's increasingly aggressive tactics. The creek that ran through her property would be essential for the railroad's water needs. Nora folded the paper, her appetite gone. Tomorrow she would ride into town and speak with Sheriff Miller. Not that she expected much help. The sheriff had made it clear he thought a woman had no business running a ranch, but she needed to establish a record of Hargrove's threats before things escalated further. As darkness fell across the valley, Nora checked her rifle one final time before placing it beside her bed. Sleep would come hard tonight, as it did most nights. But she would face tomorrow as she had faced every day since James died, with determination and the quiet courage that had always been her hallmark, even if the town called it foolish boldness. Dawn broke clear and crisp over the mountains, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. Nora had risen before first light, as was her habit since taking over the ranch. The morning chores wouldn't complete themselves, and there was comfort in the rhythm of work. She had just finished milking her cow when she heard it, the unmistakable crack of breaking wood followed by panicked lowing from the pasture. Grabbing her rifle, she raced toward the sound. Through the morning mist, she could make out 3 riders cutting through her herd, deliberately driving the cattle toward a broken section of fence. "Stop right there," she shouted, raising her rifle. The riders halted and one turned toward her. Even from this distance, she recognized Hargrove's second-in-command, a nasty piece of work named Fletcher. "Well, look here, boys. The widow's up early," Fletcher called out, his voice carrying across the field. "Get off my land, Fletcher," Nora commanded, her rifle steady. "We're just passing through, madam, helping ourselves to what's going to be ours soon enough anyway." "These cattle aren't going anywhere," Nora replied, advancing slowly. "And neither is this land." Fletcher's laugh was cold. "You sure about that? A woman like you all alone?" "Accidents happen on the frontier, Mrs. Whitman. Terrible accidents." The threat hung in the air between them. Nora's finger rested on the trigger. "I'm not afraid to defend what's mine." "That's your problem, ain't it? Too bold for your own good." Fletcher gestured to his companions. "Let's go, boys. We've made our point." As they rode off, Nora quickly assessed the damage. They'd broken through her fence and scattered about 20 head of cattle. It would take her most of the day to round them up and repair the fence, time she couldn't spare with everything else demanding her attention. By midday, sweat soaked through her shirt as she hammered the last fence post into place. Her hands were raw, her back aching. She'd managed to recover most of the cattle, but 4 were still missing. They couldn't have gone far, but searching for them would have to wait until she returned from town. The ride into Copper Creek took almost an hour. As Nora approached the main street, she felt the familiar weight of stares following her progress. Women nodded politely but kept their distance, while men either tipped their hats with exaggerated courtesy or averted their eyes completely. Being a widow made her an object of pity. Being a widow who refused to conform to expectations made her an oddity. She tied her horse outside the sheriff's office and steeled herself before pushing open the door. Sheriff Miller looked up from his desk with a frown. "Mrs. Whitman, what brings you into town?" "Hargrove's men cut my fence this morning and scattered my cattle. That's the 3rd time this month they've damaged my property." Miller sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "Did you see them do it?" "I saw Fletcher and 2 others driving my cattle through the broken section." "But you didn't actually witness them break the fence." Nora clenched her jaw. "They admitted they were on my property without permission. That's trespassing at the very least." "Mrs. Whitman," Miller said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "these boundary disputes between ranchers happen all the time. It's part of frontier life. This isn't a boundary dispute. This is intimidation." Miller's expression hardened slightly. "Have you considered that perhaps ranching isn't the most suitable occupation for a woman alone? Mr. Hargrove has made several generous offers for your land." "So you've discussed my private business with him?" Nora asked, heat rising in her cheeks. "I'm merely suggesting that selling might be the sensible option. The railroad's coming, Mrs. Whitman. Things are going to change around here, whether we like it or not." "I'm well aware of the railroad, Sheriff. That doesn't give anyone the right to drive me off my land." Miller stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "I'll speak to Fletcher about the trespassing, but I strongly suggest you reconsider Mr. Hargrove's offer before things get difficult." Fuming, Nora left the sheriff's office and headed toward Cooper's general store. She needed supplies, but more than that, she needed to speak with someone who at least pretended to see her side of things. The store was busy with the afternoon crowd when she entered. Conversations hushed momentarily before resuming at a lower volume. Nora held her head high as she approached the counter where Leland's wife, Martha, was measuring fabric for Mrs. Parsons. "Afternoon, Nora," Martha said warmly. "Leland's in the back. He'll be out in a moment." Mrs. Parsons gave Nora a tight-lipped smile. "Mrs. Whitman, we missed you at the Ladies' Aid Society meeting yesterday." "I was mending fences, Mrs. Parsons," Nora replied evenly. "Yes, well, it's just that some of the ladies were saying. That is, we're concerned about you out there alone." Mrs. Parsons lowered her voice. "It isn't proper. A young woman like yourself isolated from decent society. People talk." "Let them talk," Nora said, her patience wearing thin. "It's not just talk, my dear. Your reputation, my reputation, is the least of my concerns when I'm trying to save my livelihood," Nora interrupted. Mrs. Parsons drew herself up, affronted. "Well, I never. Such boldness." "That'll be $2.40, Mrs. Parsons," Martha interjected smoothly, handing over the wrapped fabric. As Mrs. Parsons departed with a final disapproving glance, Leland emerged from the storeroom. "Nora, good to see you. How are things at the ranch?" "Not good," she admitted, handing him her list of supplies. "Hargrove's men are getting more aggressive. Sheriff Miller was less than helpful." Leland frowned as he began gathering her items. "I hate to say it, but Miller's in Hargrove's pocket. Has been ever since the cattle baron started expanding his operations last year." "I suspected as much," Nora sighed. "Leland, I need to hire someone. I can't keep up with the repairs and the cattle and everything else on my own, especially with Hargrove's men causing trouble." "Hired hands are scarce these days," Leland said carefully. "Most men wouldn't want to work for a woman, especially one at odds with Edgar Hargrove. There must be someone." Leland hesitated. "There's rumors of a man camped by Willow Creek, stranger passing through. People are saying he's handy with both horses and a gun." "A drifter?" Nora asked skeptically. "More than that, I think. He came through town 2 days ago, didn't say much, but he carries himself like a man who's seen his share of troubles." Leland leaned closer. "Word is he was asking questions about Hargrove." Nora considered this. "Does this mystery man have a name?" "Calls himself Tucker Kincaid." "I'd be careful, though, Nora. A man with no roots and a grudge against Hargrove could be more trouble than help." "At this point, Leland, I'll take whatever help I can get." After paying for her supplies, Nora headed to the livery stable to retrieve her horse. As she secured her packages, she overheard 2 men talking just inside the stable doors. "Widow's gonna get herself killed if she keeps this up." "Shame, too. Pretty woman like that should be remarried, not playing at being a rancher. Hargrove says she's too stubborn for her own good, too bold by half. Bold ain't gonna stop a bullet." Their laughter followed her as she mounted and turned toward home. Their words stung, but they also strengthened her resolve. If this stranger by Willow Creek might help her stand against Hargrove, it was worth the risk of seeking him out. Willow Creek was a detour from her usual route home, but not significantly so. As she approached the gentle curve of the stream where willows dipped their branches into the clear water, she scanned the banks for signs of a camp. At first, she saw nothing. Then a thin wisp of smoke caught her eye, rising from a stand of cottonwood set back from the water. She approached cautiously, one hand near her sidearm. "That's far enough, madam." The voice came from behind her. Nora turned in the saddle to find herself facing a man who seemed to have materialized from the shadows of the trees. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. His dark blonde hair was longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at the collar of his worn buckskin jacket. A neatly trimmed beard covered his jaw, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, regarded her with wary assessment. "Mr. Kincaid?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Surprise flickered briefly across his features. "Who's asking?" "Nora Whitman. I own the Double W Ranch about 5 miles east of here." "The widow," he said, not a question. "Yes, I understand you might be looking for work." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "News travels fast. It's a small town. And what kind of work would a widow be offering a stranger, Mrs. Whitman?" "The kind that requires someone not afraid of Edgar Hargrove." At the mention of Hargrove's name, something hardened in Kincaid's eyes. He studied her for a long moment. "Why don't you step down from that horse, madam? Seems we have something to talk about." Nora hesitated only briefly before dismounting. As she approached his camp, she noted the simplicity of his setup: a small fire, bedroll, coffee pot, and a magnificent buckskin horse grazing nearby. The man traveled light but well prepared, judging by the quality of his saddle and the rifle resting within easy reach. "Coffee," he offered, gesturing to a log beside the fire. "Thank you." Nora sat, arranging her skirts as Kincaid poured steaming coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, putting him somewhere in his mid-30s. There was a stillness about him, a controlled energy that reminded her of a mountain lion she'd once observed watching from a ridge, patient, calculating, and completely aware of its surroundings. "So," he said, settling across from her, "what exactly is your trouble with Hargrove?" Nora explained her situation succinctly: James's death, the value of her land, Hargrove's increasingly aggressive tactics, and the sheriff's refusal to intervene. Kincaid listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing. "And you think one man can help you stand against Hargrove and his crew?" he asked when she finished. "I'm not asking you to fight my battles," Nora clarified, "but I need someone to help with the ranch while I deal with Hargrove, someone who won't be intimidated when his men come around." "And what makes you think I won't be intimidated?" "Leland Cooper mentioned you were asking questions about Hargrove. I'm guessing you have your own reasons for being interested in him." Kincaid's eyes narrowed slightly. "Maybe I do. Then perhaps we can help each other." He took a slow sip of his coffee, considering. "What are you offering?" "Room, board, and $15 a month." A surprised laugh escaped him. "That's cowhand wages, Mrs. Whitman." "It's what I can afford," she said honestly, "for now. And if I help you save your ranch from Hargrove, then we can negotiate something more suitable for the long term." Kincaid studied her, his expression unreadable. "Most folks in your position would have sold out by now." "I'm not most folks, so I've heard. They say the widow Whitman is too bold for her own good." Nora met his gaze steadily. "And what do you say, Mr. Kincaid?" For the first time, a genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his features. "I'd say you're exactly as bold as you need to be, Mrs. Whitman." He extended his hand. "I'll take that job. But I should warn you, having me around might make your situation with the townspeople even more complicated." "I'm willing to risk it," Nora said, shaking his hand firmly. His palm was calloused against hers, warm and strong. "Can you be at the ranch by tomorrow morning?" "I'll be there at first light." As Nora rode home in the fading daylight, she wondered if she'd made a wise decision. Tucker Kincaid was clearly a man with secrets, perhaps dangerous ones. But there was something in those blue eyes that had convinced her to trust him, a sense of honor, perhaps, or a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to stand your ground when the world expected you to retreat. Either way, come tomorrow, the widow and the cowboy would face Hargrove together. And for the first time in months, Nora felt a flicker of hope. True to his word, Tucker Kincaid rode into the yard of the Double W Ranch as the first golden rays of sunlight crested the eastern hills. Nora was already at work, leading her mare from the barn when she spotted him approaching. She'd half expected him not to show. "Morning, Mrs. Whitman," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. Up close in the clear morning light, she could see details she'd missed the day before: a thin scar along his jawline beneath the beard, the slight stiffness in his left shoulder when he moved, the expert way he handled his horse. "Good morning, Mr. Kincaid. You're right on time." "Tucker," he corrected. "If we're going to be working together, Mrs. Whitman, might as well use my given name." "Then you should call me Nora," she replied, noting how his gaze swept over the ranch, assessing everything from the state of the fences to the condition of the barn roof. It was the look of a man who missed nothing. "You've kept this place going on your own for 6 months?" he asked, a new note of respect in his voice. "With occasional help from neighbors," she admitted. "Though that's dried up since Hargrove started making it known he wanted my land." Tucker nodded, leading his horse toward the barn. "Show me around. I'd like to get a sense of what we're working with." For the next hour, Nora gave him a tour of the ranch, the 20 acres of cultivated fields where she grew feed for the winter, the grazing pastures, the creek with its steady year-round flow, the small apple orchard James had planted as a wedding gift to her. Tucker asked intelligent questions about the operation, quickly grasping both the potential of the land and the challenges she faced. "Your husband chose well," he commented as they stood on a rise overlooking the property. "This is prime ranching country." "James had a good eye," Nora agreed, a familiar pang of grief squeezing her heart. "He always said this valley would be the center of something important someday. With the railroad coming, he was right." Tucker turned to her. "Which is why Hargrove won't give up easily. You understand that, don't you? I'm not naive, Tucker. I know what I'm up against." He studied her face. "No, I don't believe you are naive, just determined." After a moment, he added, "Where would you like me to start?" Nora pointed to the western pasture. "I lost 4 head of cattle yesterday when Hargrove's men broke the fence. They're probably still nearby. If you could track them down while I repair the chicken coop, that would be helpful." Tucker nodded. "I'll need to familiarize myself with your brand." "Double W like this," she said, sketching the connected WTKs in the dirt with a stick. "Simple enough. I should have them back by noon." He started toward his horse, then paused. "Do you have a gun besides that rifle I saw you carrying?" "James's revolver. I keep it with me." "Good. Don't go anywhere without it." His expression was serious. "And Nora, if Hargrove or his men show up while I'm gone, don't confront them alone. Not worth risking your life over a few words. I can handle myself." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt that. But sometimes discretion keeps you alive to fight another day." With that, he mounted his buckskin and rode toward the western pasture, his posture relaxed but alert. Nora watched him go, feeling an unexpected sense of relief. Whatever Tucker Kincaid's story was, he clearly knew his way around both a ranch and trouble. The morning passed quickly as Nora tackled the chicken coop. The predator, likely a fox that had gotten in 2 nights ago, had left considerable damage, but by mid-morning she had repaired the worst of it. She was gathering eggs when she heard horses approaching. Stepping out of the coop, she was surprised to see Tucker returning with not only her 4 missing cattle, but also 3 riders she didn't recognize, 2 men and a woman. The cattle moved toward the familiar pasture without hesitation, clearly glad to be home. "Found some company along with your strays," Tucker called as he approached. "The Navarro family. Their wagon broke an axle about 5 miles from here." The oldest of the trio, a weathered man with silver-streaked black hair, removed his hat. "Mrs. Whitman, Miguel Navarro, this is my son Ernesto and my daughter Isabella. Your man here was kind enough to offer us shelter while we repair our wagon. Nora glanced at Tucker, who merely shrugged. We have the space, he said simply. Of course, Nora replied, extending her hand to the Navarros. You're welcome to stay. Are the rest of your family with the wagon? It is just us three, Miguel said. We are traveling to my brother's ranch near Tucson. He has offered us work since our own farm was taken. Something in his tone made Nora ask, taken by whom? Mr. Navarro. Miguel and Tucker exchanged a look. A man called Hargrove, Miguel finally said. He wanted our land for grazing. When we refused to sell, there was trouble. A fire. Very convenient for him. You're not the first, Nora said grimly. Hargrove has been trying to consolidate land throughout the valley. So your man has explained, Miguel nodded toward Tucker. Perhaps we can help each other, Mrs. Whitman. My son and I are experienced with cattle and horses. We could work for you while we stay. That's very kind, but I can't afford to pay 3 more hands right now. Isabella Navarro, a striking young woman with intelligent dark eyes, spoke up. We don't ask for pay, only shelter and food while we repair our wagon. We would be grateful for a safe place to rest. Nora considered the offer. Extra hands would be invaluable, especially with Hargrove increasing the pressure. And something told her the Navarros understood all too well what she was facing. Then you're welcome to stay as long as you need, she decided. Tucker can show you to the bunkhouse. It's small but sound. Gracias, Senora, Miguel said with dignity. Your hospitality will not be forgotten. As Tucker led the Navarros toward the bunkhouse, Nora noticed Isabella fall into step beside him, asking questions about the ranch. The young woman couldn't be more than 20, and her obvious interest in Tucker was evident in her animated gestures and the way she positioned herself close to him as they walked. An unexpected twinge of something not quite jealousy, but perhaps possessiveness caught Nora by surprise. She pushed the feeling aside firmly. Tucker Kincaid was her employee, nothing more. His personal matters were none of her concern as long as they didn't interfere with his work. Still, as she returned to her chores, she found herself watching the pair from the corner of her eye, noting how Tucker maintained a respectful distance from Isabella, despite the young woman's attempts to close the gap. By late afternoon, the ranch hummed with activity. Ernesto and Miguel had immediately set to work repairing fences that had needed attention for weeks. Isabella took over the kitchen, insisting that Nora allow her to prepare the evening meal. And Tucker seemed to be everywhere at once, checking the herd, inspecting the barn, examining the tools, and making mental notes of everything that needed attention. Your land has good bones, he told Nora as they stood in the doorway of the barn, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. But you've been fighting a holding action, not building for the future. Hard to build when you're constantly defending, Nora pointed out. True enough. He leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. The Navarros are good people. Hargrove burned them out after they refused to sell. Miguel's wife died in the fire. Nora's heart sank. That's terrible. Surely the law did nothing, Tucker interrupted. Same as here. Hargrove has influence, money, friends in the right places. Then how do we stop him? Tucker's eyes met hers, intense and determined. You beat him at his own game. Make this ranch too valuable, too productive to give up. And you make sure he understands that taking it will cost him more than he's willing to pay. Is that why you're here? To help me make that point. He looked away, his gaze following the last rays of sunlight as they faded from the hills. Let's just say I understand what it means to lose something that matters. Before Nora could question him further, Isabella called them for supper. The meal was a revelation: spicy beans, tender beef, and fresh tortillas that bore no resemblance to Nora's usual plain fare. The conversation flowed more easily than Nora had experienced in months, with Miguel sharing stories of his brother's successful ranch, and Ernesto discussing his ideas for improving the double WTKS irrigation system. Throughout the meal, Nora couldn't help but notice how Tucker watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. His expression was guarded, assessing, as if he were trying to reconcile what he observed with whatever he'd heard about her in town. After supper, as Isabella and Ernesto cleared the dishes, Miguel pulled out a battered guitar and began to play, his fingers coaxing a hauntingly beautiful melody from the strings. Tucker excused himself to check the horses, and on impulse, Nora followed him. The night air was cool, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tucker was examining his buckskin's foreleg when Nora entered the barn. "Is something wrong with your horse?" she asked. He straightened, not startled by her presence despite her quiet approach. "Just a stone bruise." "Nothing serious." After a pause, he added, "The Navarros are a good addition. They know ranching, and they have as much reason to stand against Hargrove as you do. You planned this, didn't you? Finding them wasn't a coincidence." A smile ghosted across his lips. "Let's say I heard about their situation and thought you might be able to help each other." "Why, you barely know me." Tucker ran a hand along his horse's neck, his expression thoughtful. "I know enough. I've been watching this valley for 2 weeks, Mrs. Whitman, Nora. I've seen how Hargrove operates. I've seen how you've stood your ground despite everything he's thrown at you. That doesn't explain why you care." He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low, controlled. "5 years ago, I had a ranch in Wyoming. Not as fine as this, but it was mine. I'd built it from nothing. Then a man like Hargrove decided he wanted my water rights. When I wouldn't sell, things got ugly." "What happened?" Nora asked softly. "They killed my foreman, burned my barn with my best horses inside." His jaw tightened. "I fought back. It got messy." "Did you kill someone?" Tucker's eyes met hers, unflinching. "Yes, in self-defense, but that didn't matter to his friends in the territorial government. I had a choice: hang for murder or leave everything I'd built and never return. So you left." "I left. Been drifting ever since, taking work where I can find it." He shrugged. "When I heard about what was happening here, with the railroad coming and Hargrove buying up land or taking it, it sounded too familiar. I decided to look into it. And now I'm thinking maybe it's time to stop running. Time to take a stand, help someone else hold onto what matters." He hesitated. "Unless my past makes you uncomfortable, I'd understand if you want me to leave." Nora considered his words, studying his face in the lantern light. There was no deceit there, only a weariness and a resolve that resonated with her own. "We all have pasts, Tucker. What matters to me is that you're here now, willing to help." Relief flickered in his eyes. "Thank you." The sound of Miguel's guitar floated through the night air, accompanied now by Isabella's clear voice singing a Spanish love song. The melody wrapped around them, intimate in the dim light of the barn. "You should get some rest," Tucker said after a moment. "I'll take first watch tonight." "Watch? Do you think Hargrove might try something?" "Better safe than sorry. The Navarro's arrival might have been noticed. Word travels fast." Nora nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "Wake me for second watch, then." "No reason you should lose a whole night's sleep." Tucker smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. "You're a remarkable woman, Nora Whitman." The compliment caught her off guard, warming her in unexpected ways. "Good night, Tucker," she managed, turning toward the house before he could see the color she felt rising in her cheeks. "Good night, Nora," he replied softly. As she walked back to the house under the vast canopy of stars, Nora realized that for the first time since James's death, she felt something other than grief and determination. Hope, yes, but something else too, a flutter of awareness, of possibility, that both excited and terrified her. She paused at the door, looking back toward the barn where Tucker now stood, a silhouette against the night sky. Whatever happened in the days ahead, she was no longer facing it alone. For tonight, that was enough. The next week brought changes to the Double W Ranch that transformed not just the property but the atmosphere itself. With 5 people working instead of 1, long-neglected repairs were completed, fences strengthened, and the small herd of cattle better protected. Ernesto proved to be gifted with irrigation systems, creating a more efficient method of watering the vegetable garden and nearby fields. Isabella's cooking and cheerful presence brightened the house, while Miguel's quiet wisdom provided a steadying influence on them all. And Tucker. Tucker seemed to anticipate needs before they arose, working from dawn until dusk with tireless energy. He taught Nora better ways to manage the herd, showed her how to repair the pump when it faltered, and somehow found time to reinforce the barn doors and windows of the house against potential attacks. "You're expecting trouble," Nora observed as she helped him install heavy shutters on the kitchen window. "Hargrove's been too quiet," Tucker replied, driving another nail with precision. "It's been 5 days since his men were last seen near your property. He's planning something. Or maybe he's reconsidering now that I'm not alone." Tucker gave her a sidelong glance. "Men like Hargrove don't reconsider, they regroup." She knew he was right. The calm felt temporary, like the stillness before a storm. But she couldn't deny that these days of peaceful productivity had been a balm to her spirit. Working alongside Tucker had become a pleasure she hadn't anticipated, the easy rhythm they fell into. The way they could communicate with just a look or gesture, the quiet conversations as they completed evening chores. More than once, she'd caught herself watching him when he wasn't aware, the play of muscles under his shirt as he chopped wood, the gentleness of his hands when he tended an injured calf, the rare but transformative smile that appeared when something amused him. It was dangerous territory, these feelings stirring within her. James had been gone just over 6 months too soon, by society's standards, for a widow to think of another man. And Tucker himself remained something of a mystery, despite the fragments of his past he'd shared with her. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, interrupting her reverie. Nora blinked, realizing she'd been staring at him. "I was just thinking how much we've accomplished in a week." He murmured, clearly not convinced. "Hand me that last hinge, would you?" As she passed it to him, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of awareness through her that she couldn't ignore. Tucker's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Then he cleared his throat and returned to his work, but the air between them had shifted, charged with unspoken possibilities. "Riders coming." Ernesto's voice called from outside, breaking the moment. Tucker was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. 5 of them, Hargrove's in the lead. Nora's heart raced as she joined him at the window. Sure enough, Edgar Hargrove and 4 of his men were approaching the house at a leisurely pace, as if they had every right to be there. "Stay inside," Tucker instructed. "Let me handle this." "This is my ranch," Nora countered, reaching for her rifle. "I'll face him with you." A flash of admiration crossed Tucker's face. "All right, but let me do the talking, at least at first. Hargrove doesn't know me yet. That might give us an advantage." They stepped onto the porch together as the riders pulled to a stop in the yard. Miguel and Ernesto emerged from the barn, casually positioning themselves where they could provide cover if needed. Edgar Hargrove was a substantial man in his 50s, with a florid face and the expensive clothes of someone who wanted others to recognize his wealth. He regarded Tucker with open curiosity. "Mrs. Whitman," Hargrove called, ignoring Tucker completely. "I see you've acquired some help." "How resourceful of you, Mr. Hargrove," Nora replied coolly. "You're trespassing." Hargrove chuckled, looking to his men as if sharing a joke. "Always so direct. It's one of the things I admire about you." His gaze slid to Tucker. "And who might this be?" "Tucker Kincaid," Tucker answered before Nora could speak. "Ranch manager." "Is that so?" Hargrove studied him. "Don't recall seeing you around these parts before. Been around longer than you might think." Something in Tucker's tone made Hargrove look at him more carefully. "Have we met?" "Not directly, but I know your type well enough." Hargrove's smile tightened. "Is that right? Well, Mr. Kincaid, since you're managing things now, perhaps you can talk some sense into Mrs. Whitman. I've made a very generous offer for this property, twice what it's worth." "Seems to me if you're offering twice what it's worth, you must think it's worth more than you're saying," Tucker observed mildly. Hargrove's face darkened. "My business arrangements are none of your concern. When they involve harassment and threats against my employer, they become my concern." Fletcher, sitting on horseback just behind Hargrove, leaned forward. "You'd best watch your tone, stranger. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Tucker replied, his voice dangerously soft. "A man who burns out those who won't sell to him. A man who intimidates widows and destroys other people's property when he doesn't get his way." Hargrove's facade of geniality vanished. "Those are serious accusations, Kincaid. Facts, not accusations. You should be careful. Drifters who stir up trouble tend to find themselves unwelcome in these parts." Tucker smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not as easy to get rid of as you might hope." Tension crackled between the two men, a silent battle of wills that even Hargrove's men seemed to recognize as dangerous. After a long moment, Hargrove turned back to Nora. "Mrs. Whitman, my offer stands for 1 more week. After that, I can't guarantee it will remain so generous, or that circumstances will remain favorable for you to continue operating this ranch." "Is that a threat, Mr. Hargrove?" Nora asked evenly. "A business reality, my dear. The railroad is coming. Progress can't be stopped. You'd be wise to profit from it while you can." Tucker stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Nora. "I think Mrs. Whitman has made her position clear. This ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not next week, not ever." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." He jerked his horse around. "1 week, Mrs. Whitman. Then my patience runs out." As the riders departed, kicking up dust in their wake, Nora released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That went well," she said dryly. Tucker's expression was grim. "It went as expected. He's putting you on notice. The real trouble starts when that week is up. What do? We prepare." Tucker turned to Miguel and Ernesto, who had joined them. "How's that wagon axle coming along?" Miguel exchanged a look with his son. "It could be repaired quickly if necessary. But perhaps we are not in such a hurry to leave now." "I appreciate that," Tucker said, "but I need to know your position. When Hargrove makes his move, it could get dangerous. You and your family have already lost enough to that man." "Which is why we will stay," Miguel said firmly. "Some things are worth fighting for, no. This good woman gave us shelter when we needed it. We do not abandon friends in their time of need." Nora was touched by the declaration. "Thank you, Miguel, but Tucker's right, this isn't your fight." "With respect, Senora, it became our fight when Hargrove burned our farm." Miguel's eyes hardened with remembered pain. "My Carolina died because of that man's greed. I could not face her in the next life if I walked away now." Ernesto nodded in agreement. We stand with you." The solidarity of these people, virtually strangers a week ago, moved Nora deeply. "Thank you," she said simply. As they moved inside to discuss strategy, Isabella met them at the door, her expression worried. She had clearly overheard the confrontation. "Papa, are you sure this is wise?" "It is necessary, Hija," Miguel replied. "Sometimes a man must take a stand." Isabella glanced at Tucker, concern evident in her dark eyes. "And you, is this your stand as well?" Tucker met her gaze steadily. "Yes." Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of sorts. Isabella nodded once and turned to Nora. "Then I will help too. I may not be able to shoot a gun, but I can keep watch and tend to wounds if it comes to that." The practicality of her offer reminded Nora that frontier women often faced violence as a reality of life. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," she said. "But thank you, Isabella." As they gathered around the kitchen table, Tucker outlined his plan. "Hargrove gave us a week, but I don't trust him to wait that long. We need to be ready at all times. Miguel, you and Ernesto take turns watching the north and east approaches. I'll cover the south and west." "And me?" Nora asked. "You keep doing what you've been doing, running this ranch and showing everyone that you're not intimidated." Tucker's eyes held hers. "You're the heart of this operation, Nora. Everything we're doing is to protect what you've built." His words warmed her, but she shook her head. "I can't ask you all to risk yourselves while I stay safe." "Nobody's asking you to stay safe," Tucker corrected. "Just to stay focused on why we're fighting in the first place. This land, this ranch, it's your legacy. Never forget that." The conviction in his voice silenced any further protest. As the others discussed specifics of their defensive preparations, Nora found herself watching Tucker, the confidence with which he spoke, the natural leadership he exhibited, the way the others responded to his quiet authority. This was a man accustomed to command, to responsibility. A man who had, as he'd told her, built something from nothing before losing it all. She wondered, not for the first time, what else there was to Tucker Kincaid's story. And whether, when this conflict with Hargrove was resolved one way or another, he would stay or move on as he had apparently done so many times before. The thought of him leaving caused an unexpected ache in her chest. Somehow, in just over a week, Tucker had become essential to her in ways that went beyond his help with the ranch. His steady presence, his quiet strength, the rare moments when his guard dropped and she glimpsed the man beneath the careful exterior, all of it had begun to matter to her, more than she was ready to admit. As the meeting broke up and everyone moved to their assigned tasks, Tucker caught her arm gently. "A word?" he asked quietly. Nora nodded, following him onto the porch where the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. For a moment he said nothing, just gazed out at the land, his expression distant. "What is it?" she finally asked. "There's something you should know," he said, his voice low. "Something I didn't tell you about my past." Nora's heart quickened. "I'm listening." "When I said Hargrove's type was familiar to me, it wasn't just because of what happened in Wyoming." He turned to face her, his blue eyes serious. "The man who took my ranch was Edgar Hargrove's brother, William." Shock coursed through her. "Hargrove's brother?" Tucker nodded grimly. "They're cut from the same cloth, land grabbers, both of them, using whatever methods necessary to expand their holdings. William operates in Wyoming and Colorado, Edgar here in Arizona. Different territories, same tactics." "Does Edgar know who you are? That you had dealings with his brother?" "I don't think so. I used a different name back then, my mother's maiden name, and it was 5 years ago." Nora processed this new information. "So this isn't just about helping me, it's personal for you." Something flickered in Tucker's eyes, regret, perhaps, or uncertainty. "I won't lie to you. When I first heard about what was happening here, I was curious because of the Hargrove connection. But once I saw you saw how you stood your ground despite everything, my reasons changed." "What do you mean?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "I mean that helping you protect your ranch became more important than any personal history with the Hargrove family." Nora studied his face, searching for deception but finding only earnestness. "Why tell me this now?" "Because things are about to get dangerous, and you deserve to know exactly who's fighting alongside you." His jaw tightened. "If you want me to leave, say the word. The Navarros will stay either way. They have their own score to settle with Edgar. And if I want you to stay—" Tucker's expression softened. "Then I stay, for as long as you need me." The weight of those words hung between them, carrying implications neither was ready to voice. Nora found herself stepping closer to him, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I want you to stay, Tucker," she said softly. "Not just because of Hargrove, but because—" A sudden rifle shot cracked through the air, splintering the porch railing inches from where they stood. Tucker reacted instantly, pushing Nora down and covering her with his body as a second shot followed the first. "Sniper on the ridge." Ernesto shouted from somewhere near the barn. "Stay down," Tucker ordered, drawing his revolver as he rolled off her. "Can you make it inside?" Nora nodded, adrenaline clearing her mind. "Yes, my rifle's by the door. Go, I'll cover you." As Nora scrambled for the door, Tucker fired 2 rapid shots toward the distant ridge where a puff of smoke had revealed the sniper's position. Miguel appeared at the corner of the house, his own rifle at the ready. "They are earlier than expected," the older man observed calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Hargrove's not one for keeping his word," Tucker replied, scanning the surrounding terrain. "See anyone else?" "Not yet. But if there is one, there will be more." Nora emerged from the house with her Winchester, moving in a crouch to join them at the corner of the porch. "Isabella's watching the back of the house," she reported. "No sign of movement there yet." Tucker nodded approval. "Good. Miguel, take the barn. You'll have better cover there and can watch the eastern approach. Ernesto's already at the corral. I'll stay here with Nora." As Miguel moved off, another shot rang out, kicking up dirt at his feet. He dove for cover behind the water trough, unhurt but pinned down. "Damn it," Tucker muttered. "There's at least 2 of them up there. Covering fire on 3, he asked Nora. She nodded, bracing her rifle. "Ready." 1, 2, 3. They both fired toward the ridge, providing enough distraction for Miguel to make it to the barn. As they reloaded, Tucker's eyes never stopped scanning the surroundings. "This is just the beginning," he warned. "They're trying to pin us down, maybe draw us out. The main force will come soon." As if summoned by his words, the thunder of hoofbeats sounded from the west. Nora's heart sank as she counted at least 8 riders approaching fast, Hargrove's form and Fletcher at their head. "So much for his 1-week ultimatum," she said grimly. Tucker's expression hardened. "Stay close to me. Whatever happens, don't let them separate us." The riders thundered into the yard, spreading out to surround the house. Fletcher raised a hand, signaling them to halt just out of easy rifle range. "Kincaid," he shouted. "We've got no quarrel with you or the Mexicans. Send Mrs. Whitman out to talk business with Mr. Hargrove, and the rest of you can ride away unharmed." "That's generous of you," Tucker called back, sarcasm evident in his tone. "Except we all know what Hargrove's idea of business involves. Don't be a fool. You're outnumbered." "Maybe," Tucker conceded. "But you'll lose more men than you can afford before you take this ranch." Fletcher conferred with his men, clearly not having expected such determined resistance. After a moment, he called out again. "Hargrove says he'll double his offer. That's 4 times what this land is worth." "It's not for sale at any price," Nora shouted before Tucker could respond. Tell Hargrove if he wants to talk, he can come himself instead of sending his dogs to do his dirty work." A ripple of unease went through Fletcher's men. Being called dogs by a woman clearly stung their pride. "Your choice, Mrs. Whitman," Fletcher said coldly. "Boys, burn them out." At his command, 2 riders broke away, circling toward the barn with torches ready to light. Tucker and Nora fired simultaneously, their shots forcing the men to veer away from their intended target. What followed was a chaotic exchange of gunfire, as Fletcher's men sought to approach the buildings while the defenders kept them at bay. The snipers on the ridge provided covering fire, making it dangerous to move in the open. But between Tucker, Nora, Miguel, and Ernesto, they managed to maintain a defensive perimeter that prevented the attackers from getting close enough to set fire to the structures. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for an unexpected development. From the direction of town came the sound of more riders, a large group moving at speed. "Reinforcements," Tucker said grimly. "Hargrove must have sent for more men." But as the new arrivals came into view, Nora gasped in surprise. "That's Sheriff Miller and Leland Cooper, and half the town by the looks of it." Indeed, at least 15 men from Copper Creek were approaching, led by the sheriff and the storekeeper. They rode directly into the yard, positioning themselves between Fletcher's men and the house. "What the hell's going on here, Fletcher?" Sheriff Miller demanded, his voice carrying across the now silent battlefield. Fletcher looked suddenly uncertain. "Just having a discussion about property rights, Sheriff." "With guns?" Miller's skepticism was evident. "Looks more like an attempted land grab to me." Leland Cooper rode forward, addressing Nora. "We've been hearing rumors for days that Hargrove was planning something. When we saw his men riding out armed like this, we figured it was time to show where the town stands." Nora was stunned. I mean, the sheriff seemed to be." "In Hargrove's pocket," Miller finished for her, having the grace to look embarrassed. "Maybe I was leaning that way. But Cooper here showed me some interesting documents yesterday that changed my perspective." Tucker stepped forward, rifle still at the ready but his posture less defensive. "What documents?" Leland reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Telegraph from the territorial governor. Seems Mr. Hargrove has quite a reputation across the territories. His brother William is currently facing charges in Wyoming for similar tactics: intimidation, arson, even murder. The governor has authorized a full investigation into Hargrove's land acquisitions in this county," Miller added. "And he's particularly interested in the fire that claimed the Navarro farm." At this, Miguel emerged from the barn, his expression a mixture of grief and vindication. "My wife will have justice. If these allegations prove true, yes," Miller confirmed. "The territorial marshal is already on his way." Fletcher and his men exchanged uneasy glances. Without Hargrove's protection, they were facing serious legal consequences. "I suggest you boys ride back and tell your boss the situation has changed," Miller advised. "And that if he's smart, he'll cooperate with the investigation." For a moment, it seemed Fletcher might resist, but a quick count of the townspeople and their determined expressions convinced him otherwise. "This isn't over," he muttered, signaling his men to withdraw. As Fletcher's men and the Ridge snipers retreated, an almost unbelievable silence fell over the ranch. Nora found herself shaking with the aftermath of tension and fear, her rifle suddenly heavy in her hands. Tucker was at her side instantly, his hand warm on her arm. "You all right?" She nodded, unable to find words for the flood of emotions coursing through her. Relief, yes, but also confusion. "Why?" she finally managed, looking toward Leland and the others. "Why would the town suddenly stand with me?" Leland dismounted, approaching with a smile. "It wasn't so sudden, Nora." Many of us have been uncomfortable with Hargrove's methods for some time, but he has influence and people were afraid to speak out. What changed, Mr. Kincaid here? Leland said, nodding to Tucker. He's been quietly gathering evidence against Hargrove for weeks, talking to people who'd been pressured to sell, documenting patterns. When he brought it all to me 3 days ago, I knew we had to act. Nora turned to Tucker in surprise. You did this. Why didn't you tell me? Tucker's expression was apologetic. I wasn't sure it would work, didn't want to raise your hopes. The final piece was confirming the connection between Edgar and William Hargrove, Leland continued. Once we had that, and proof of William's legal troubles in Wyoming, the governor took notice. Nora tried to absorb it all, the sudden reversal of the town's attitude, the revelation of Tucker's behind-the-scenes efforts, the promise of justice for the Navarros and others Hargrove had wronged. So it's over, she asked, hardly daring to believe it. Not entirely, Sheriff Miller cautioned. Hargrove still has money and connections, but his days of operating above the law in this county are numbered. And your ranch is safe, Mrs. Whitman. I'll personally see to that. The townspeople began to dismount. Men Nora had thought indifferent or even hostile now approaching with handshakes and words of support. Mrs. Parsons and several other women from town arrived in a wagon shortly after, bringing food and offers of help with repairs to the bullet-damaged buildings. We should have stood with you sooner, Mrs. Parsons admitted, her earlier disapproval replaced with admiration. It takes courage to stand your ground the way you have. Perhaps we all thought you were too bold, but now I see you were brave enough for the whole town. The words echoed what Tucker had said to her at their first meeting, and Nora sought him out in the crowd. She found him standing apart, watching the activity with a small smile. As she approached, something in his expression made her heart beat faster. You did all this, she said softly. The town did it, he corrected. They just needed a nudge. Thank you seems inadequate, Tucker shrugged. Seeing you keep your ranch is thanks enough. A question occurred to her. The evidence you gathered, you were doing that before you even met me, weren't you? Yes, he admitted. Like I told you, I had my reasons for being interested in Hargrove. Your ranch in Wyoming, he nodded. What happened there? I couldn't change it, but I could try to prevent it happening here. Nora studied him, seeing beyond the capable cowboy to the man beneath a man who had lost everything and still found the courage to help others, who had worked quietly to bring justice when he could have simply moved on. What will you do now? She asked, suddenly afraid of his answer. With Hargrove's threat diminished, you could move on. Something shifted in Tucker's eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Is that what you want me to do? No, Nora said, the word escaping before she could consider its implications. No, I don't want you to go. Tucker took a step closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. When I first came here, I thought I was just settling an old score. But then I met you, this remarkable, stubborn, brave woman who refused to be intimidated. And somewhere along the way, my reasons changed. How did they change? Nora asked, her heart thundering in her chest. I stopped thinking about the past, started thinking about the future. His hand came up hesitantly to brush a strand of hair from her face. A future here, maybe, if there's a place for me. The tenderness of the gesture, the hope in his voice, broke through the last of Nora's reservations. There's a place, she whispered. There has been almost from the first day. Around them, the activity of the townspeople faded into a distant hum as their eyes held. Tucker's hand lingered near her face, warm and strong. For a moment, neither moved, balanced on the edge of something profound and irrevocable. Then, with gentle deliberation, Tucker leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, questioning at first, then deepening as Nora responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel the rapid beating of his heart matching her own. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Tucker's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I think I'd like to stay, Mrs. Whitman, for as long as you'll have me." "That might be a very long time, Mr. Kincaid," Nora replied, her own smile matching his. "I'm counting on it." As the celebration continued around them, Nora knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them not as the widow who was too bold, but as a woman who had found the courage to embrace a future she hadn't dared imagine. And she would face it with Tucker Kincaid by her side, a man brave enough to match her stride for stride along the way. The weeks following the standoff at the Double W Ranch brought changes that rippled through the entire valley. Edgar Hargrove, faced with a territorial investigation and the sudden dissolution of his influence in Copper Creek, opted to sell his holdings and leave Arizona before the marshal could build a case against him. The Navarro family received compensation for their lost farm, though no amount of money could replace Miguel's beloved Carolina. For Nora and Tucker, the transition from employer and employee to something deeper happened with a natural ease that surprised them both. As summer turned to fall, they settled into a partnership that extended beyond the running of the ranch to include stolen moments of tenderness, long conversations under the stars, and a growing certainty that what had begun as an alliance against a common enemy had become something far more precious. The first snowfall of winter found them sitting before the fireplace in Nora's cabin, a pot of coffee warming on the hearth and plans for spring planting spread across the table between them. "If we expand the north pasture here," Tucker was saying, his finger tracing a line on the rough map he'd drawn, "we could increase the herd by at least 30 head next year." "Ambitious," Nora observed, leaning against his shoulder to study the map. "But the irrigation system Ernesto designed should make it manageable." Tucker nodded, his arm sliding naturally around her waist. The casual intimacy of the gesture still sent a thrill through her. "The Navarros have been a blessing." "Are you sure Miguel won't accept part ownership in exchange for their continued help?" He's adamant. "Says he prefers working for wages until he can afford to buy his own place again." Nora smiled. "Though I think part of it is that he enjoys watching Isabella and Ernesto build something here." Indeed, the young Navarros had thrived at the Double W. Ernesto's innovations had improved productivity throughout the ranch, while Isabella had transformed the household operations and started a small side business selling her preserved foods and baked goods in town. The family now occupied the expanded bunkhouse, which had become a cozy home under Isabella's care. "Speaking of building something," Tucker said, setting aside the map, "I've been thinking." Nora recognized the tone slightly hesitant, with an undercurrent of determination that usually preceded one of his more ambitious ideas. "About us, this," he gestured between them, "what we're doing here." A flutter of uncertainty passed through her. Despite their growing closeness, they had never explicitly discussed the future. "Go on." Tucker turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Nora. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood your ground with your rifle and told me exactly what you needed." The declaration, simple and direct, stole her breath. "Tucker, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it hasn't been a year since James died. I know there are conventions about these things. But out here, life moves at its own pace. And I don't want to waste another day pretending I'm just your ranch manager." "No one thinks that's all you are," Nora said softly, squeezing his hands. "Not anymore." "Good, because what I want to be is your husband." The firelight caught the blue of his eyes, turning them almost silver. "If you'll have me." Joy welled up within her, so powerful it was almost painful. "Are you proposing, Tucker Kincaid?" His smile was tender. "Not very elegantly, but yes. Will you marry me, Nora? Make this partnership official in every way." "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "yes. Nothing would make me happier." The kiss that followed sealed their promise, deep and sweet and full of shared dreams. When they finally parted, Tucker reached into his pocket and withdrew a small carved wooden box. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he confessed, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small diamond that caught the firelight. "It was my mother's." Nora gasped softly as he slipped it onto her finger. "It's beautiful. She would have liked you," Tucker said, a wistful note in his voice. "Said I should find a woman with fire in her spirit and kindness in her heart." His finger traced the curve of her cheek. "I found that and more in you." Overcome with emotion, Nora could only kiss him again, pouring all her love and hope into the gesture. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his. "When?" "As soon as you want. Though I was thinking spring might be nice. New beginnings and all that." "Spring," Nora agreed. "When the wildflowers bloom in the valley." They sat in contented silence for a time, watching the fire and envisioning their future together. Eventually, Nora spoke the thought that had been growing in her mind for some time. "I've been thinking too, you know. About the ranch. About what to call it now that it's becoming something new." Tucker raised an eyebrow. "You want to change the name? I thought the double W was for Whitman." "It was, but soon I'll be a Kincaid." Nora smiled at how right that felt to say aloud. "And this place is as much yours now as it is mine. We built it together, really." "What did you have in mind?" "The Brave Heart Ranch," Nora said, watching his reaction. "Because that's what it took for both of us to get here, brave hearts willing to take a stand and then take a chance on each other." Tucker's expression softened with emotion. "Brave heart," he repeated. "I like it." After a moment he added with a grin, "Though folks might still say the widow was too bold to rename her dead husband's ranch." "Let them talk," Nora replied, curling closer into his embrace. "You said it yourself when we first met. I'm exactly as bold as I need to be." "And brave enough for two," Tucker murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the land in pristine white, while inside, wrapped in warmth and love, Nora and Tucker planned the next chapter of their life together, a life built on courage, determination, and the deep, abiding love that had grown between a bold widow and the cowboy who had recognized her bravery from the very beginning. Spring arrived in a riot of color and fragrance, the valley coming alive with wildflowers and the tender green of new growth. The winter had been mild, allowing work on the ranch to continue almost uninterrupted. By the time the wedding day dawned clear and bright in early April 1886, the Brave Heart Ranch, as it was now known throughout the county, was thriving, its expanded herds grazing contentedly on lush pastures and its fields promising abundant crops. The ceremony itself was simple but joyful, held beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak that stood on a gentle rise overlooking the ranch. Nearly everyone from Copper Creek attended, along with ranchers and farmers from miles around, all gathered to witness the union of the woman they had once called too bold, and the man who had helped her prove that boldness was exactly what was needed. Nora wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha Cooper had helped her sew, adorned with lace from her mother's wedding dress. Her dark hair was crowned with a circlet of spring blossoms, and in her hands she carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning by Isabella. Tucker, standing beneath the oak in a new black suit, watched with undisguised adoration as Nora approached on Miguel's arm. The older man had asked for the honor of giving her away, and Nora had accepted with tears in her eyes, knowing how much it meant to him to participate in this moment of joy after so much grief. The minister's words were largely lost to Nora as she gazed into Tucker's eyes, seeing there all the promise of their future together. When the time came to speak their vows, her voice was clear and strong, her hand steady as she placed the plain gold band on Tucker's finger. "I, Nora, take you, Tucker, to be my husband, my partner in all things, my comfort in sorrow, my companion in joy. I promise to stand with you through whatever challenges life brings, to build our home and our legacy together, and to love you faithfully all the days of my life." Tucker's voice, usually so controlled, wavered slightly with emotion as he repeated similar words, adding his own promise. "I will be your shelter in storms, your champion in battles, your equal in all things, and your devoted husband until my last breath." As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, a cheer went up from the assembled guests. Tucker gathered Nora close, his kiss a seal on their promises and a celebration of the love that had brought them to this moment. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with tables set up in the ranch yard, lanterns strung between the buildings, and Miguel's guitar providing music for dancing. There was laughter and storytelling, abundant food prepared by the women of the town under Isabella's direction, and more than a few toasts to the couple who had, in standing their ground against Hargrove, helped preserve the independence of the entire valley. Sheriff Miller, more than slightly tipsy by midnight, raised his glass and declared, "To Mrs. Kincaid, the woman they said was too bold, and the man who said she was brave enough for two." The toast was met with enthusiastic approval, and Nora, nestled in the circle of Tucker's arm, felt a profound sense of rightness. This was her place, these were her people, and this man was her heart's true companion. As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Tucker led Nora away from the yard toward a small rise where they could see the entire ranch spread out before them, silvered by moonlight. "Happy, Mrs. Kincaid?" he asked softly, his arms encircling her from behind. "Completely," Nora replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "And you, more than I ever thought possible." His lips brushed her temple. "I've been wanting to show you something, a wedding gift of sorts." "Oh," Nora turned in his arms, curious. "What kind of gift?" Tucker took her hand. "Come with me." He led her along a path that wound through the cottonwoods toward the creek, but instead of following it to the water, he turned aside to a small clearing she rarely visited. There, in the moonlight, stood the frame of a new building, the beginnings of a house, larger and more substantial than the cabin they currently shared. Nora gasped, moving forward to touch the freshly cut timber. "Tucker, when did you do this?" "Ernesto and I have been working on it for weeks, whenever we could spare the time." His expression was a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "I thought, that is, I hoped you might want a fresh start, a home we build together rather than the one you shared with James." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. While she had never felt uncomfortable living in the cabin she had shared with her first husband, she understood Tucker's desire for them to create something that was uniquely theirs. "It's perfect," she said softly, examining the outline of what would be a spacious main room with large windows positioned to capture both the morning light and the sunset view of the mountains. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since winter," Tucker admitted. "Miguel helped with the design. He says it's positioned perfectly sheltered from the north wind, but open to the cooling breezes from the creek in summer." Nora could already envision it a proper home with rooms for children, a wide porch for summer evenings, perhaps even a small study where Tucker could work on his increasingly complex ranch management. The thought filled her with joy. "I love it," she said simply, turning back to him. "And I love you for thinking of it." Tucker's smile was radiant as he drew her close. "There's more to the gift," he said, a hint of mischief in his voice. "More. Tucker, this is already too much. This part didn't cost anything but time," he assured her. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a folded document. "I had Leland help me with the legal language." Curious, Nora opened the paper. In Tucker's neat handwriting was a deed transferring half ownership of his preemption, claim 160 acres of land adjoining her ranch to the west to Nora Whitman Kincaid, my wife and partner. "You filed a claim?" Nora asked, surprised. "When?" "Back in January. The land became available when Hargrove's holdings were broken up." Tucker looked slightly sheepish. "I should have discussed it with you first, but I wanted it to be a surprise. It's good grazing land with a small spring-fed pond that never dries up, even in the hottest summers." Nora was momentarily speechless. The addition of 160 acres of quality grazing land would significantly increase their capacity for expansion. But more than that, the gesture represented Tucker's commitment to building their future together. "This is—" she began, struggling to find words adequate to express her feelings. "Tucker, this is wonderful, but are you sure you want to put it in my name too? It's your claim." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "Everything I have is yours, Nora. Everything I am is yours." "I meant what I said in our vows, equals in all things." Overcome, Nora pulled him close for a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. When they finally parted, both breathless, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "I have one more surprise," he murmured, "but this one's for tonight only." Taking her hand, he led her to the far side of the clearing where, partially hidden by a stand of young pines, stood a large tent. Lantern light glowed softly from within, casting a warm, golden haze through the canvas. "I thought we might spend our wedding night here," Tucker explained, a touch of uncertainty in his voice. "Under the stars on our land with the sound of the creek nearby. But if you'd rather go back to the cabin—" "No," Nora said quickly, touched by the romance of his plan. "This is perfect." As Tucker held open the tent flap, Nora stepped inside and gasped in delight. The interior was transformed into a cozy haven, a large bedroll covered with soft blankets, pillows scattered invitingly, a small table with wine and 2 glasses, and lanterns casting a gentle glow over everything. Someone Isabella, Nora suspected, had scattered wildflower petals across the blankets. "When did you arrange all this?" Nora asked, turning to find Tucker watching her with tender amusement. "Ernesto helped me set it up this morning before the wedding. Isabella took care of the decorative touches." His smile turned slightly shy. "I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special." "It is," Nora assured him, stepping close to loosen his tie. "Everything about today has been perfect." Tucker's hands came up to cup her face gently. "You're perfect," he murmured, bending to brush his lips against hers. "My brave, bold, beautiful wife." The kiss deepened, tender, becoming passionate as months of restrained desire finally found release. As Tucker's hands moved to the buttons at the back of her gown, Nora surrendered to the moment, to the night, to the love that had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined a year ago. Later, wrapped in blankets and each other's arms, they lay listening to the night sounds of their land, the gentle murmur of the creek, the occasional call of an owl, the rustling of pine needles in the soft breeze. "No regrets?" Tucker asked softly, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Nora raised herself on one elbow to look at him, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had come into her life when she needed him most. "None," she said firmly, "except perhaps that we didn't meet sooner." Tucker smiled, drawing her back down to rest against his chest. "Everything in its time, my love. We weren't ready for each other before, but we're ready now." "Yes," Nora agreed, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "We're ready now." As she drifted towards sleep in the shelter of her husband's arms, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought them here from a widow too bold for her own good and a drifter with a painful past, to partners building a life and a legacy together on land they both loved. It was not the future she had once envisioned, but it was richer, more vibrant, more full of promise than anything she could have imagined. And as for being too bold, Nora smiled in the darkness. Tucker had been right from the very beginning. She was exactly as bold as she needed to be, bold enough to stand her ground, bold enough to open her heart again, and bold enough to embrace the magnificent adventure that lay ahead with the man who had recognized her courage when others had only seen defiance. Together, they were brave enough for whatever the future might hold. And that, Nora knew, was the greatest gift of all.